welcome to this BBC News special. I'm Katty Kay with Christian Fraser in Washington. In the next 30 minutes or so, President Trump will arrive here on Capitol Hill to take part in a time-honoured tradition, the State of the Union address. It will be his third address, and it's an annual report card, really, on the health of the nation and a wish list of things that he would like to implement in the year that's coming up. It will take place in the same chamber where he was impeached less than 2 months ago.
And this evening's speech is themed the Great American Comeback. Economic successes and military strength are likely to feature prominently in this speech, and it comes a day, of course, before his impeachment trial, which is due to wrap up tomorrow. Mr. Trump declined to testify in those proceedings, but he will be front and centre tonight, and over the course of the next few hours we will bring you analysis and reaction, as well as the speech itself, of course, as soon as it gets underway.
Let's bring in Ron Christie, who was a former advisor to President George W. Bush. Ron joins us from our Washington bureau. Ron, State of the Union's a sort of test of the president's popularity in some senses, because if he goes in there tonight buoyant and feeling good about himself, thinking that he's in a good position, that will be reflected to some extent in what he says and his manner and his tone, won't it?
Good evening to you, Katty. Yes, I think it will. It's going to be an interesting juxtaposition of looking at President Trump, talking about the State of the Union, being very upbeat, and yet and still sitting right behind his shoulder is Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, who led the charge to impeach him and try to convict him and remove him from office. So what I'm looking for tonight, it's going to be very interesting to see how the president reacts, how Nancy Pelosi sort of choreographs to her Democratic members of Congress whether to cheer, whether not to cheer, how to react. So this is going to be an optics night for us tonight of what the true State of the Union is, not only here in Washington, D.C., but around the rest of the United States.
Of course, everybody is going to focus on what he might say regarding the impeachment, Ron. His staff say that there is no impeachment word in the entirety of the speech, but of course we know that this president sometimes does go off the teleprompter.
Yeah, good evening, Christian. That's exactly right. And I have heard from folks in the White House that he does not have impeachment as part of his printed remarks. But we know the president well. We know that he likes to say improvisational things and say what pops into his mind. I wouldn't be surprised if we actually hear him make some sort of veiled reference, not only to his impeachment by the House of Representatives, but his presumed acquittal tomorrow in the United States Senate, a vote that will take place at 4 p.m. So anything goes with Donald Trump, and tonight I expect the unexpected.
He had today his traditional lunch with television anchors. Well, some television anchors, some were excluded from that lunch. But he had this lunch and he seemed to lay out to them that what he wants to do is give a dignified presidential address. I think he said that it was going to be more toned down than people might be accustomed to. Otherwise, in other words, not a kind of campaign rally style Donald Trump that we're going to see. But he goes into this feeling pretty good, doesn't he, Ron? I mean, he's got economic numbers are doing well. His approval ratings are ticking up. And yesterday we had an almighty fiasco in the Democratic Party in the Iowa caucuses, for which we still don't have full results. It's not a bad night for Donald Trump.
Shouldn't be, Katty. Gallup just came out with a poll today that said that his approval ratings are at 49%, which is the highest level in his presidency. You look at African-American unemployment, minority unemployment levels, they're the lowest that we've seen in many, many decades, as well as the fact that the American economy seems to be going quite strong at this juncture. So if you're Donald Trump and you're heading into the House chamber this evening with the pomp and the circumstance that we'll see shortly, you have to be thinking he's feeling pretty bullish, not only about the remarks that he's about to deliver to the American people and to the world, but in fact, the State of the American Union at this juncture seems to be pretty strong.
Okay, Ron Christie, stay with us. Up on Capitol Hill, we should just explain what is happening at the moment. The members of Congress who are actually in the building kind of just behind Christian and I, about 200 yards away from where we're standing, they're all now filing in to the chamber, which is the House chamber. It is the House of Representatives, the lower chamber, that invites the president to come and speak. It's not actually in the US Constitution, but it's become a tradition. And Nancy Pelosi offered this invitation to the president to come and speak, which of course now has turned out to be right in the middle of his actual impeachment trial in the Senate. There will be attending the senators, the members of the House of Representatives, the members of the cabinet, and the members of the Supreme Court, and the chiefs of the armed services will all be there as well. One member of the cabinet, though, Christian, is not there, and he is known, or she is known, as the designated survivor, on which a television series was based.
Yeah, just actually watching live pictures of the chamber. The Vice President, Mike Pence, is on his way in there. And also we've just spied Nancy Pelosi, who is in her seat. And
we understand the President is leaving the White House at the moment. He drives the 2 miles down Pennsylvania Avenue in the Beast. There it is. He is getting into that car. And these are live pictures of the President leaving, I think it's from the South Portico.
Yeah, and I was just saying that we've just seen Nancy Pelosi in the House, who's sitting in the Speaker's chair tonight, and will sit behind the President again, as she was in 2018, dressed in suffragette white. So you're going to see some of the Democrat women in white tonight, some of them including Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is one of the prominent Democrat congresswomen from New York, of course. She is not attending. They've boycotted this speech tonight. And we're also told that the 7 House managers who, of course, prosecuted the impeachment in the Senate are going to be sitting in his eye line in a prominent position in the chamber tonight, knowing full well, as does he, of course, that he will be acquitted tomorrow.
And there goes the Beast with the President, and I assume there's Melania Trump as well, the First Lady. She'll be sitting up in a gallery overlooking the House floor, and traditionally the President and his wife invite guests. There is a survivor of the widow of a man who was killed by a bomb in Iraq that was supplied apparently by Soleimani, the Iranian general who was killed. There is the family of somebody who was shot by an illegal immigrant. There is a girl who is doing well in an underperforming school. People who the President will point to during the course of the evening up there in the gallery.
Let's go to Boston and speak to Marianne Marsh. She's a Democratic political analyst. And of course, while this is all going on, we should just mention the other big story of the night, which is, of course, Iowa. Because in the past few hours, we've learnt that Pete Buttigieg, the mayor from South Bend, Indiana, is near the top of the pile, albeit that only 62% of the results are in. He's just ahead of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, and Joe Biden finishing a long way behind. So what do you make of the results that you've seen, Marianne?
Well, I do think it's a disservice that the Iowa Democratic Party put out partial results. They should have waited till it was all finished, because a fraction of a percent can determine whether someone gets a delegate or not. That said, I think what we're looking at is a Warren, Sanders, Buttigieg at the top 3, and we have Biden at best in 4th place. And for Joe Biden, had this been announced last night, he would have gone limping into New Hampshire today, and I think it's the beginning of the end of Joe Biden. I don't see him winning New Hampshire. You can't come in 4th in Iowa. It's hard to see him winning Nevada, and his support in South Carolina, his firewall, is already eroding. And he had to make an appeal this morning on a call, his campaign, to calm the funders down and try to get money because he's running out of money again. So when you're the guy who says you can beat Donald Trump and you come in 4th in Iowa, that's a bad day.
So not a good night for Joe Biden in Iowa. Who, if anyone, apart from Donald Trump perhaps, has benefited from the way that these results have been rolled out, mishandled, however you want to characterize it, Marianne?
Joe Biden. And he had to stand in front of the country last night and declare to everybody that he came in 4th place. The coverage would have been devastating, not across the country, in Iowa, in New Hampshire. And I think that would have made the situation worse. Right now, it's not clear who's going to come in first. It looks like Buttigieg. We'll see. I still think it's early. But for Joe Biden, his 4th place finish hurt him badly, but no one will know about it last night, today, tonight, maybe tomorrow. But we're well into New Hampshire, and the State of the Union tonight steps on all things Iowa. So when you only have 7 days left to the New Hampshire primary, you've got the State of the Union today, you've got a debate Friday night, and you have Donald Trump in Manchester Monday night at a rally stepping on the New Hampshire primary. That's not a lot of time for any of these candidates to make a lot of news.
The big prize in Iowa is always, of course, momentum, Marianne. the fact that the result came in late, does it undercut the boost that Pete Buttigieg would have got? And of course, what comes with momentum is cash, the lifeblood of any campaign.
Exactly right. And it's quantifiable. The winner of Iowa always gets an immediate 3-point bump in the polls. No one's going to get that. So whether it was Buttigieg, Sanders or Warren, that's a real thing. And if you can use those 3 points to garner more momentum, you can run your way to a win in New Hampshire when maybe you weren't in the position to do it last week. So if it's Buttigieg or anyone else, they could have used that bump, because right now it's not clear. There's no really clear front runner in New Hampshire right now. And Iowa usually plays the role of either giving you momentum, and if you win Iowa and New Hampshire, you run the table, or they pump the brakes on you like they did with Obama in 2008. And now it's not clear what's going to happen. And there's an old saying in politics, Iowa picks corn, New Hampshire picks president. And I think that just might be true tonight.
So, Marianne, let me just quickly ask you about the State of the Union. You mentioned it. The converse of what we were just talking about with Ron Christie is true for Democrats. This is actually turning out to be a pretty good night for the president to be going into that chamber, albeit, we all talked about, my goodness, he's going to be going in there while the impeachment trial is going on. He knows he's about to be acquitted. He knows the economy is doing well. He knows that he has the Democratic fiasco of Iowa as a contrast. Is this a tough time for Democrats in this election cycle?
Well, every election cycle, as you know, Katty, is like a roller coaster. So the best day could end up the worst one in 24 hours or less. I think for Donald Trump tonight, though, it's how he handles this night. If he's clearly going to get acquitted tomorrow. He will have dodged the bullet again. And yet most people would say, give your State of the Union speech. Appeal to bipartisanship, ask people to work with you, tout your accomplishments, but it's hard to imagine he's going to be able to avoid the temptation to air his grievances too, because just beyond those teleprompters are all the Republicans who will be cheering him on. Then you have the Democrats and the House managers who brought this impeachment case against him right in his eyesight, and as Ron mentioned earlier, Nancy Pelosi sitting behind him, breathing down his neck, and they have not spoken for several months now. So I think how Donald Trump handles this tells you everything about how he's going to launch his campaign.
Okay, Marianne Marsh there joining us from Boston. Marianne, thanks very much for that. I think we can go, we were just showing you there the live pictures of what's happening. Maybe we can go back to those for just a second. Up on Capitol Hill in the House of Representatives, where you can see the members of Congress filing in. They're up on the stage. You've got Nancy Pelosi dressed, as Christian said earlier, in white. To her right is the Vice President, Mike Pence. They will take those seats and they will sit for the whole evening. And we understand that President Trump is going to speak for about an hour and a half. It could go longer if there is a lot of applause, and they will sit behind him. They will be in shot, in vision, as the president is speaking the whole time. And you see there, that was Senator Rand Paul, the Libertarian Republican, just coming into the chamber. Here you see the Democratic caucus women dressed once again in white, in solidarity with victims of sexual harassment and the Me Too movement.
It was a good point that Marianne made, actually, about the two of them not talking, Nancy Pelosi and the president. They've not actually spoken since October the 16th, a meeting at the White House in which he called her a third-grade politician. And so there will be a lot of eyes on her tonight, and people think back to 2018 when she did that sort of funny clap behind him with her arms stretched outwards, almost in some mockery. There is not a good relationship between these two. And of course, when you think about the content of the speech, a legislative program that he might try and set out, very difficult to do that when the Democrats control the House, of course, and he and Nancy Pelosi aren't speaking.
Yes, I mean, it was a very different State of the Union this time last year, wasn't it? The Democrats had just won back the House. They were feeling confident. Now it looks like, from what we can see of the initial reaction to impeachment, it's been a wash for the president. If anything, it seems to have improved his approval ratings a little bit. They've recently ticked up. So there are the senators coming in, Rand Paul, as we said earlier.
And there must be some recognition on the Democrat side. After those results in Iowa and the fiasco of the way that the vote was counted, the fact that a relative political novice is the top of the pile, a lot of the second round, the second alignment votes drifted away from Bernie Sanders. They're in a bit of disarray after Iowa, and there must be some people in the Democratic conference thinking, you know what, we could be facing another 4 years of Donald Trump here.
I'm sure they're realizing that Donald Trump is not going to be easy for them to beat. But it's, it's very early in the process. We've just had Iowa. Iowa was very difficult. And the whole point of these early caucuses and primaries is that they make the field narrower. They weed people out. Let's go to Iowa. And Neda Tawfik is there for us, still in Iowa. I bet you didn't expect to be in Iowa 24 hours after the caucuses had finished, Neda. Any more news? We've had 62% of those results. Any more news on when we're going to get a full Iowa count?
Well, Katty, what the Iowa Democratic Party has said is that they'll keep trying to update the results until 10 p.m. local our time. Then at that point, we'll just have to wait till tomorrow to see what they do. The last time I checked, we were still at 62%, at least a range there from precincts from all across Iowa's 99 counties. But as you mentioned, this has created a lot of confusion because here you have Pete Buttigieg declaring victory, saying, this is an astonishing victory for his campaign because a year ago, he said that they basically said that he had no business daring to get on the national stage. And here he is, a 38-year-old openly gay mayor of small town South Bend, Indiana, winning the first major contest here in Iowa. So for him, he was very emotional speaking to supporters in New Hampshire about this win. This has really given him a bit of a boost. But Bernie Sanders at the same time saying that he thinks when all the results are in, that he will be the ultimate victor with the top ticket out of Iowa. And also his campaign pointing out that he won the popular vote. So the first and second counts there of the caucus before the unviable candidates' voters went to others. But Bernie Sanders had the majority of voters there. And it's just really interesting looking at these two because, of course, they are from different generations. They have different ideologies, believe different things in their campaigns. But both have really energized voters, and both are offering a change in politics as usual. And so what we see is that, at least in Iowa, has appealed to people more so than Joe Biden's argument that he can beat Donald Trump, that he is the most electable. Remember that ad, don't take a risk, go with me. Well, Iowans clearly thought it would be too much of a risk to go with Joe Biden.
Okay, Neda Tawfik in Des Moines, thank you for the moment. Let's take you back to the live pictures that we're getting in from the House. Of course, we know that Donald Trump is on his way, is making his way down Pennsylvania Avenue towards the House of Representatives. We can just see there Nancy Pelosi addressing the House. We've just seen her gavel in all the people that are waiting for Donald Trump. And what you'll see as the president arrives at the door is
the Sergeant at Arms will announce him.
And a corridor of people eager, Republicans mostly, eager to shake the president's hand as he makes his way
Yes,
to the
some
stage.
members will have been sitting there for hours holding their seats in order to be the ones who are right next to the aisle there where the president will walk down, and they like to have a quick word in his ear, perhaps about something that's pertinent to their district, or offering their support, or just making sure he notices them. So those are kind of prime positions. And we saw earlier, I think, the family members as well, Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner, they were up on a balcony overlooking it, and then the president's wife, Melania Trump, will also be up there as well.
And as Ron said, a lot of these Republicans that you're looking at really hoping that he focuses on the optimistic message tonight, because Donald Trump does have a very good story to tell here. You look at growth, over 2%. Many
Close
European
to 4%
countries would be very keen to have growth figures like that. Job numbers are up, unemployment very low, and that's the sort of thing that, of course, is making him very popular within Republican ranks. 94% his approval rating among Republican supporters at the moment. So what he needs to do is remind independent voters, of course, wavering voters, and not just his base, that there is a good economic story here, and they need to send him back to the White House in November.
So the president will come in, he will hand both the speaker and the vice president. Here we go. There we had one announcement, and that was the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps. There are various diplomats also invited to the State of the Union address. It is largely a ceremonial thing. And I have to say, over the time that I've been living here, there are very few lines from States of the Union addresses that people actually remember. In fact, generally speaking, people will point to two. One from Bill Clinton, the era of big government is over, and the second from President George W. Bush when he talked about the axis of evil. Ask anyone for other lines from States of the Union addresses, it's pretty hard to come up with them.
And since you mentioned Bill Clinton, it's important to say that there are two other presidents who have made State of the Union addresses while under impeachment. Bill Clinton in 1999, he made a speech about an hour and a quarter long, didn't mention impeachment once, whereas Richard Nixon in 1974 did talk about it, said the country had had enough of Watergate. So how will Donald Trump approach that this evening? Will he not be able to help himself, even though it's not in the speech?
That he's not going to be talking about it, and maybe he feels he doesn't really want to talk about it. There's not a huge amount of upside to him for bringing it up. Perhaps, as you say, I think priority for him is to talk about his achievements. And let's talk to our North America correspondent Anthony Zerka, who was in Des Moines, Iowa, and who actually had the honor, Anthony, of having one of your tweets retweeted by the president today. I imagine that upped your Twitter following something on your way back from Iowa. That must have come as a bit of a surprise to you, the impact the president has. Look, all of these people are there because they know they are close to power. Anthony Zerka's been close to power today on his Twitter feed.
Yeah, I think you can see the smoke coming out of my telephone this morning when Donald Trump retweeted. It was a video of
you better tell us what that tweet was. What was the tweet?
Yeah, it was a video at the caucus site I was attending last night near Des Moines, Iowa, where the caucusing after the first round and the realignment round ended in a tie between Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar. And they had to call a hotline and consult with the Democratic state party headquarters and determine that the way they break that tie is with a coin toss. And so this teenager who was there with his dad to observe the caucuses, almost a kind of tourist to see democracy in action, he got called upon as an impartial witness to tossed the coin. It kind of looked like he had never tried tossing a coin before. He caught it somewhat awkwardly, kind of flipped it over, and it ended up being heads, which delivered that one last delegate to Pete Buttigieg. But I think Donald Trump retweeted that because it looked kind of awkward. It looked kind of chaotic. It was, democracy being settled by chance. And that was part of his strategy, I think, to paint all of this boondoggle that the Democrats were in last night as just a combination of incompetence or maybe fanning the flames of conspiracy in order to help divide the Democratic Party.
Can I ask you, we should talk about the State of the Union, but I'm just eager to know, Anthony, there's a lot of soul-searching in Iowa about what went on with this app. And somebody was asking me today, does the federal government not get involved in how states count votes? It's quite extraordinary from someone from a little country like the UK.
States' rights.
That you don't have a national system for counting the vote. And maybe that's what's gone wrong here.
Yeah, I mean, these primary systems, they're run by the parties. I mean, they get assistance from the states, but not the federal government. It's very clear that the states are involved in these sorts of things. But the caucus system, the rules of the caucus, what to do in an instance of a tie, that's all determined by the Iowa Democratic Party, not even the National Democratic Party, which, some people have been more than willing to point fingers at. There was a report I read where they designed this app. They didn't really test it too much under stressful circumstances. They didn't consult with the Department of Homeland Security to find out whether it was secure or not. So there were a lot of things that they probably could have done.
Anthony, I'm just going to interrupt you there because we have the members of the Supreme Court filing in, led, of course, by Chief Justice John Roberts. There was some question about whether the Chief Justice, who is also presiding over the president's impeachment trial in the Senate, would show up. But he has said that he's going to, and we just saw him walk in. It's tradition that all of the members of the Supreme Court come in fully dressed in their robes.
Including the two people that he appointed to the bench, of course, which is a reminder for people around the country.
A very powerful signal to conservatives about why they like this president. It is actually, by the way, on that point about each state deciding how it votes, it is a line in the Constitution that the states should be allowed to vote in the way in which they wish. And so it would be very dramatic to suddenly say the national government was going to take control of it.
But that's the debate, isn't it? That in a time where you've got concerns about the integrity of the ballot and the Russians may be involved or may not be involved, whether you need a federally protected system, a national system that is rigorous and has been tested.
In such a big country as this, maybe
been tested properly.
States would say we are better off at protecting ourselves than the federal government.
Well, so long
and
as
there
they
is so much
contest it
suspicion of
rigorously.
yes. Well, generally speaking, in most primaries where it is a ballot, it works pretty well. The issue is this caucus system and this dramatic change to the caucus system. Anyway, there we are back on Capitol Hill. All of this that we are talking about in Iowa, the backdrop, of course, to this very extraordinary State of the Union. I have to say, having covered very many of these now, I have never covered a State of the Union quite like this one. You have to say, with a president who is facing impeachment, an Iowa caucus happening the day before that didn't work out as planned, a very close election campaign. It's a pretty strange time.
And it
to
has
have a
become
State
more
of the Union
partisan,
address.
this, isn't it? I mean, when you think
It's
back
all-
to past presidents, yes, there was always a partisan element to it, but this was an occasion when the country came together. And yet tonight, there are Democrats who are boycotting.
One Democrat, yes, that we know of, Alexandra Ocasio. 7 of them are there.
There are 7 Democrats that are boycotting tonight. So,
But I do remember when, Barack Obama gave his State of the Union, there was also somebody who stood up and said he was a liar. So it's not totally unheard of for the opposing side to be critical of the president who is there.
just caught sight of Kamala Harris there, who, of course, dropped out of the presidential race quite early on. Some have talked about her maybe being a running mate for Joe Biden, but of course that's not going to happen unless Joe Biden can get his campaign off the ground. He does have that firewall, doesn't he, Joe Biden, in South Carolina? A lot of people have talked about that today, but I just wonder if he's not won by South Carolina, will people be asking serious questions about his campaign?
Well, that was what Mary Ann was suggesting. This might be the beginning of the end of Joe Biden's campaign. Let's see what... he's not doing particularly well in the polls in New Hampshire, so he does have to do well in South Carolina and ideally in Nevada for him as well. The camera, by the way, is picking out all of the presidential candidates one by one.
What do we
saw
think
Julian
about...
Castro
I'm
was
just
there.
looking at Nancy Pelosi there, who, of course, took a very brave decision to impeach the president. She waited and she waited until she couldn't wait any longer. It's not worked for the Democrats. The turnout in Iowa was very low last night. Some were speculating maybe it was low because there'd been so much focus on impeachment and not on the caucusing in Iowa. Do we think it's backfired on her?
I think that's a tricky one to tell at the moment. You look at the approval ratings of the president and they've certainly ticked up a little bit. She had a very vociferous caucus who felt they had no choice. I mean, I've spoken to Democrats who didn't want to impeach the president and really after the Ukraine call felt they had no choice but to honour the oath that they had sworn to protect the Constitution. So whether they wanted to or not, we know that Nancy Pelosi didn't want to, right? She resisted for a long time the calls to impeach the president. I think we will still have to see there's Melania Trump coming in. She will be up on the balcony.
One of the headlines today,
And
of
there
course,
you can see on the left Jared Kushner and Tiffany Trump, as well on the right in the, I think that's pale grey, isn't it? We're going to go with.
Yeah. The First Lady taking her seat alongside some of the people that they have invited to be with them tonight in the gala, to whom you will hear the President refer during this speech. You and I are going to be here tomorrow talking about the vote on the impeachment as we look at those pictures. There will be some Democrats, senators as well, knowing now full well that they are not going to impeach the president, that they're going to acquit him, the likes, just listening to the applause for the First Lady there, but there will be some Democrats who say maybe we don't vote to impeach the president tomorrow. Is that possible?
And here are the members. Yes, there could be a couple. Joe Manchin is one, Doug Jones is another. Here are the members of the cabinet coming in as well. And as we said earlier, there will be one designated survivor. Mike Pompeo, very powerful Secretary of State, has become particularly powerful actually over the course of the last year.
Steve Mnuchin there, the Treasury Secretary, who will be crucial to the Brexit talks with the United Kingdom. Just behind him. We can also see Bill Barr there, the Attorney General, who's been so central, of course, in this impeachment story over the last few months. Shaking hands with...
National Security Advisor there. We don't know who the
John
designated survivor is. The designated survivor goes to an undisclosed location, which is widely known to be a facility in Virginia about
Was it
an hour.
Rick Perry last time, the Energy Secretary? Was he the...
Last year, I
I think it was last year, wasn't it? Maybe check that for you.
Elaine Chao, who is the House. She was the longest serving secretary in the whole of the Bush administration.
And one by
Saying
one.
housing with some hesitation there, she could be transport. Betsy DeVos, who was campaigning for the president out in Iowa just a couple of days ago. Transportation
Let's
secretary.
bring in Marianne as we look at these pictures. What do you make, Marianne, in Boston there, of the Democrats who decided not to be there tonight? I was saying there were around 7 of them. One of them is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from New York, the congresswoman. Do you approve of that sort of thing, or should they be there?
I personally think everyone should be there. I understand why they're protesting. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez isn't there. Ayanna Pressley, who's from Massachusetts, who I know very well, is not attending either. So people are using it as a form of protest in many ways. So are the women who are dressed in white, the Democratic women who are dressed in suffragette white, as is Nancy Pelosi. So there are many ways to protest. I think one of the things that has happened over the last few years is our undercutting of our institutions and the usual behavior and conduct. And I think attending things like this is very important, and we shouldn't undermine our democratic institutions, and honoring this tradition is one of the very important ones. And to Katty's point earlier, during Barack Obama's State of the Union speech, one Republican member did stand up and call him a liar, and that was shocking at the time. I wonder if we haven't become a little numb to all that, but I do think it's important to honor our traditions, and I hope we get back to doing more of that, and this is one of the most important ones.
Marianne, when was the last time you can think of that State of the Union addresses were less partisan?
It's been a long time, and it's hard to think back. I mean, maybe George H.W. Bush, maybe George W. Bush after 9/11. I think it's probably one you would point to, and the whole country came together at the height of his popularity as well. But I think after that, it's hard to point to another one where it hasn't been very, very partisan. But I think we're at another level of partisanship now with Donald Trump in the White House.
The relationship we've been talking about tonight between Nancy Pelosi and the president, the things that he sets out in this speech, they're not really feasible, are they, in 2020? I mean, it depends really, the programme that he sets out, whether he's re-elected. Here
One
he is.
second, Marianne, we're going to interrupt you right there. Here is the president
Let's listen in
about
on some of
to
this.
enter the chamber, and he'll be introduced in a second by the Sergeant at Arms, and then we'll walk in. Here we go.
Madam Speaker, the President of the United States.
So there we have the president coming in for his third annual State of the Union address. He has told reporters that he's planning to speak for an hour and 25 minutes. We are not sure if that includes breaks for applause, of which we expect there will be many from the Republican side. Generally speaking, what happens is that it's a very partisan affair, as Marianne was saying, and the Republicans will applaud and the Democrats will stay seated.
Very interesting interchange there. He stopped at the Chief Justice, John Roberts, and engaged him for a few seconds, didn't he? Maybe, of course, talking about what's been going on in the Senate and the fact that he's been presiding over the impeachment proceedings. But here he goes up onto the stage. Let's listen in again.
The President taking a round of applause before being introduced.
Of the United States.
Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, Mr. Vice President, members of Congress, the First Lady of the United States. And my fellow citizens, 3 years ago, we launched the Great American Comeback. Tonight, I stand before you to share the incredible results. Jobs are booming, incomes are soaring, poverty is plummeting, crime is falling, confidence is surging, and our country is thriving and highly respected again. America's enemies are on the run, America's fortunes are on the rise, and America's future is blazing bright. The years of economic decay are over. The days of our country being used, taken advantage of, and even scorned by other nations are long behind us. Gone too are the broken promises, jobless recoveries, tired platitudes, and constant excuses for the depletion of American wealth, power, and prestige. In just 3 short years, we have shattered the mentality of American decline, and we have rejected the downsizing of Americans' destiny. We have totally rejected the downsizing. We're moving forward at a pace that was unimaginable just a short time ago, and we are never, ever going back. I am thrilled to report to you tonight that our economy is the best it has ever been. Our military is completely rebuilt, with its power being unmatched anywhere in the world, and it's not even close. Our borders are secure. Our families are flourishing. Our values are renewed. Our pride is restored. And for all of these reasons, I say to the people of our great country and to the members of Congress, the state of our union is stronger than ever before. The vision I will lay out this evening demonstrates how we are building the world's most prosperous and inclusive society, one where every citizen can join in America's unparalleled success and where every community can take part in America's extraordinary rise. From the instant I took office, I moved rapidly to revive the U.S. economy, slashing a record number of job-killing regulations, enacting historic and record-setting tax cuts, and fighting for fair and reciprocal trade agreements. Our agenda is relentlessly pro-worker, pro-family, pro-growth, and most of all, pro-American. Thank you. We are advancing with unbridled optimism and lifting our citizens of every race, color, religion, and creed very, very high. Since my election, we have created 7 million new jobs, 5 million more than government experts projected during the previous administration. The unemployment rate is the lowest in over half a century. And very incredibly, the average unemployment rate under my administration is lower than any administration in the history of our country. If we hadn't reversed the failed economic policies of the previous administration, the world would not now be witnessing this great economic success. The unemployment rate for African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and Asian Americans has reached the lowest levels in history. African American youth unemployment has reached an all-time low. African American poverty has declined to the lowest rate ever recorded. The unemployment rate for women reached the lowest level in almost 70 years, and last year women filled 72% of all new jobs added. The veterans' unemployment rate dropped to a record low. the unemployment rate for disabled Americans has reached an all-time low. Workers without a high school diploma have achieved the lowest unemployment rate recorded in U.S. history. A record number of young Americans are now employed. Under the last administration, more than 10 million people were added to the food stamp rolls. Under my administration, 7 million Americans have come off food stamps, and 10 million people have been lifted off of welfare. In 8 years under the last administration, over 300,000 working-age people dropped out of the workforce. In just 3 years of my administration, 3.5 million people, working-age people, have joined the workforce. Since my election, the net worth of the bottom half of wage earners has increased by 47%, 3 times faster than the increase for the top 1%. After decades of flat and falling incomes, wages are rising fast, and wonderfully, they are rising fastest for low-income workers who have seen a 16% pay increase since my election. This is a blue-collar boom. Real median household income is now at the highest level ever recorded. Since my election, U.S. stock markets have soared 70%, adding more than $12 trillion to our nation's wealth, transcending anything anyone believed was possible. This is a record. It is something that every country in the world is looking up to. They admire. Consumer confidence has just reached amazing new highs. All of those millions of people with 401ks and pensions are doing far better than they have ever done before, with increases of 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100% and even more. Jobs and investments are pouring into 9,000 previously neglected neighborhoods, thanks to Opportunity Zones, a plan spearheaded by Senator Tim Scott as part of our great Republican tax cuts. In other words, wealthy people and companies are pouring money into poor neighborhoods or areas that haven't seen investment in many decades, creating jobs, energy, and excitement. This is the first time that these deserving communities have seen anything like this. It's all working. Opportunity Zones are helping Americans like Army veteran Tony Rankins from Cincinnati, Ohio. After struggling with drug addiction, Tony lost his job, his house, and his family. He was homeless. But then Tony found a construction company that invests in opportunity zones. He is now a top tradesman, drug-free, reunited with his family, and he is here tonight. Tony, keep up the great work, Tony. Thank you, Tony. Our roaring economy has, for the first time ever, given many former prisoners the ability to get a great job and a fresh start. This second chance at life is made possible because we passed landmark criminal justice reform into law. Everybody said that criminal justice reform couldn't be done, but I got it done, and the people in this room got it done. Thanks to our bold regulatory reduction campaign, the United States has become the #1 producer of oil and natural gas anywhere in the world, by far. With the tremendous progress we have made over the past 3 years, America is now energy independent, and energy jobs, like so many other elements of our country, are at a record high. We are doing numbers that no one would have thought possible just 3 years ago. Likewise, we are restoring our nation's manufacturing might, even though predictions were, as you all know, that this could never, ever be done. After losing 60,000 factories under the previous 2 administrations, America has now gained 12,000 new factories under my administration, with thousands upon thousands of plants and factories being planned or being built. Companies are not leaving. They are coming back to the USA. The fact is that everybody wants to be where the action is, and the United States of America is indeed the place where the action is. One of the biggest promises I made to the American people was to replace the disastrous NAFTA trade deal. In fact, unfair trade is perhaps the single biggest reason that I decided to run for president. Following NAFTA's adoption, our nation lost 1 in 4 manufacturing jobs. Many politicians came and went pledging to change or replace NAFTA, only to do so, and then absolutely nothing happened. But unlike so many who came before me, I keep my promises. We did our job. Six days ago, I replaced NAFTA and signed the brand new U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement into law. The USMCA will create nearly 100,000 new high-paying American auto jobs and massively boost exports for our farmers, ranchers, and factory workers. It will also bring trade with Mexico and Canada to a much higher level, but also to be a much greater degree of fairness and reciprocity. We will have that fairness and reciprocity, and I say that finally because it's been many, many years that we were treated fairly on trade. This is the first major trade deal in many years to earn the strong backing of America's labor unions. I also promised our citizens that I would impose tariffs to confront China's massive theft of America's jobs. Our strategy has worked. Days ago, we signed the groundbreaking new agreement with China that will defend our workers, protect our intellectual property, bring billions and billions of dollars into our treasury, and open vast new markets for products made and grown right here in the USA. For decades, China has taken advantage of the United States. Now we have changed that. But at the same time, we have perhaps the best relationship we've ever had with China, including with President Xi. They respect what we've done because, quite frankly, they could never really believe that they were able to get away with what they were doing year after year, decade after decade, without someone in our country stepping up and saying, "That's enough." Now we want to rebuild our country, and that's exactly what we're doing. We are rebuilding our country. As we restore American leadership throughout the world, we are once again standing up for freedom in our hemisphere. That's why my administration reversed the failing policies of the previous administration on Cuba. We are supporting the hopes of Cubans, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans to restore democracy. The United States is leading a 59-nation diplomatic coalition against the socialist dictator of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro. Maduro is an illegitimate ruler, a tyrant who brutalizes his people, but Maduro's grip on tyranny will be smashed and broken. Here this evening is a very brave man who carries with him the hopes, dreams, and aspirations of all Venezuelans. Joining us in the gallery is the true and legitimate president of Venezuela, Juan Guaido. Mr. President, please take this message back to your family. Thank you, Mr. President. Great honor. Thank you very much. Please take this message back that all Americans are united with the Venezuelan people in their righteous struggle for freedom. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you very much. Socialism destroys nations, but always remember, freedom unifies the soul. To safeguard American liberty, we have invested a record-breaking $2.2 trillion in the United States military. We have purchased the finest planes, missiles, rockets, ships, and every other form of military equipment, and it's all made right here in the USA. We are also getting our allies, finally, to help pay their fair share. I have raised contributions from other NATO members by more than $400 billion, and the number of allies meeting their minimum obligations has more than doubled. And just weeks ago, for the first time since President Truman established the Air Force, more than 70 years earlier, we created a brand new branch of the United States Armed Forces. It's called the Space Force. Very important. In the gallery tonight, we have a young gentleman, and what he wants so badly, 13 years old, Ian Launfay. He's an 8th grader from Arizona. Ian, please stand up. Ian has always dreamed of going to space. He was the first in his class and among the youngest at an aviation academy. He aspires to go to the Air Force Academy, and then he has his eye on the Space Force. As Ian says, most people look up at space. I want to look down on the world. But sitting behind Ian tonight is his greatest hero of them all. Charles McGee was born in Cleveland, Ohio, 1 century ago. Charles is one of the last surviving Tuskegee Airmen, the first black fighter pilots, and he also happens to be Ian's great-grandfather. Incredible story. After more than 130 combat missions in World War II, he came back home to a country still struggling for civil rights and went on to serve America in Korea and Vietnam. On December 7th, Charles celebrated his 100th birthday. A few weeks ago, I signed a bill promoting Charles McGee to Brigadier General, and earlier today, I pinned the stars on his shoulders in the Oval Office. General McGee, our nation salutes you. Thank you, sir. From the Pilgrims to the founders, from the soldiers at Valley Forge to the marchers at Selma, and from President Lincoln to the Reverend Martin Luther King, Americans have always rejected limits on our children's future. Members of Congress, we must never forget that the only victories that matter in Washington are victories that deliver for the American people. The people are the heart of our country. Their dreams are the soul of our country, and their love is what powers and sustains our country. We must always remember that our job is to put America first. The next step forward in building an inclusive society is making sure that every young American gets a great education and the opportunity to achieve the American dream. Yet for too long, countless American children have been trapped in failing government schools. To rescue these students, 18 states have created school choice in the form of opportunity scholarships. The programs are so popular that tens of thousands of students remain on a waiting list. One of those students is Janiyah Davis, a fourth grader from Philadelphia. Janiyah. Janiyah's mom, Stephanie, is a single parent. She would do anything to give her daughter a better future. But last year, that future was put further out of reach when Pennsylvania's governor vetoed legislation to expand school choice to 50,000 children. Janiyah and Stephanie are in the gallery. Stephanie, thank you so much for being here with your beautiful daughter. Thank you very much. But Janiyah, I have some good news for you, because I am pleased to inform you that your long wait is over. I can proudly announce tonight that an opportunity scholarship has become available. It's going to you, and you will soon be heading to the school of your choice. Now I call on Congress to give 1 million American children the same opportunity Janiyah has just received. Pass the Education Freedom Scholarships and Opportunities Act, because no parent should be forced to send their child to a failing government school. Every young person should have a safe and secure environment in which to learn and to grow. For this reason, our magnificent First Lady has launched the Be Best initiative to advance a safe, healthy, supportive, and drug-free life for the next generation, online, in school, and in our communities. Thank you, Melania, for your extraordinary love and profound care for America's children. Thank you very much. My administration is determined to give our citizens the opportunities they need, regardless of age or background. Through our pledge to American workers, over 400 companies will also provide new jobs and education opportunities to almost 15 million Americans. My budget also contains an exciting vision for our nation's high schools. Tonight, I ask Congress to support our students and back my plan to offer vocational and technical education in every single high school in America. To expand equal opportunity, I am also proud that we achieved record and permanent funding for our nation's historically black colleges and universities. A good life for American families also requires the most affordable, innovative, and high-quality health care system on earth. Before I took office, health insurance premiums had more than doubled in just 5 years. I moved quickly to provide affordable alternatives. Our new plans are up to 60% less expensive and better. I've also made an ironclad pledge to American families. We will always protect patients with pre-existing conditions. And we will always protect your Medicare, and we will always protect your Social Security, always. The American patient should never be blindsided by medical bills. That is why I signed an executive order requiring price transparency. Many experts believe that transparency, which will go into full effect at the beginning of next year, will be even bigger than health care reform. It will save families massive amounts of money for substantially better care. But as we work to improve Americans' health care, there are those who want to take away your health care, take away your doctor, and abolish private insurance entirely. 132 lawmakers in this room have endorsed legislation to impose a socialist takeover of our health care system, wiping out the private health insurance plans of 180 million very happy Americans. To those watching at home tonight, I want you to know we will never let socialism destroy American health care. Over 130 legislators in this chamber have endorsed legislation that would bankrupt our nation by providing free taxpayer-funded health care to millions of illegal aliens, forcing taxpayers to subsidize free care for anyone in the world who unlawfully crosses our borders. These proposals would raid the Medicare benefits of our seniors and that our seniors depend on, while acting as a powerful lure for illegal immigration. That is what is happening in California and other states. Their systems are totally out of control, costing taxpayers vast and unaffordable amounts of money. If forcing American taxpayers to provide unlimited free health care to illegal aliens sounds fair to you, then stand with the radical left. But if you believe that we should defend American patients and American seniors, then stand with me and pass legislation to prohibit free government health care for illegal aliens. This will be a tremendous boon to our already very strongly guarded southern border, where, as we speak, a long, tall, and very powerful wall is being built. We have now completed over 100 miles and have over 500 miles fully completed in a very short period of time. Early next year, we will have substantially more than 500 miles completed. My administration is also taking on the big pharmaceutical companies. We have approved a record number of affordable generic drugs, and medicines are being approved by the FDA at a faster clip than ever before. And I was pleased to announce last year that for the first time in 51 years, the cost of prescription drugs actually went down. And working together, Congress can reduce drug prices substantially from current levels. I've been speaking to Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa and others in Congress in order to get something on drug pricing done, and done quickly and properly. I'm calling for bipartisan legislation that achieves the goal of dramatically lowering prescription drug prices. Get a bill on my desk and I will sign it into law immediately. With unyielding commitment, we are curbing the opioid epidemic. Drug overdose deaths declined for the first time in nearly 30 years. Among the states hardest hit, Ohio is down 22%, Pennsylvania is down 18%, Wisconsin is down 10%, and we will not quit until we have beaten the opioid epidemic once and for all. Protecting Americans' health also means fighting infectious diseases. We are coordinating with the Chinese government and working closely together on the coronavirus outbreak in China. My administration will take all necessary steps to safeguard our citizens from this threat. We have launched ambitious new initiatives to substantially improve care for Americans with kidney disease, Alzheimer's, and those struggling with mental health. And because Congress was so good as to fund my request, new cures for childhood cancer, and we will eradicate the AIDS epidemic in America by the end of this decade. Almost every American family knows the pain when a loved one is diagnosed with a serious illness. Here tonight is a special man, beloved by millions of Americans, who just received a stage 4 advanced cancer diagnosis. This is not good news, but what is good news is that he is the greatest fighter and winner that you will ever meet. Rush Limbaugh, thank you for your decades of tireless devotion to our country. And Rush, in recognition of all that you have done for our nation, the millions of people a day that you speak to and that you inspire, and all of the incredible work that you have done for charity, I am proud to announce tonight that you will be receiving our country's highest civilian honor, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. I will now ask the First Lady of the United States to present you with the honor, please. Rush and Catherine, congratulations. Thank you, Catherine. As we pray for all who are sick, we know that America is constantly achieving new medical breakthroughs. In 2017, doctors at St. Luke's Hospital in Kansas City delivered one of the earliest premature babies ever to survive. Born at just 21 weeks and 6 days and weighing less than a pound, Ellie Schneider was a born fighter. Through the skill of her doctors and the prayers of her parents, little Ellie kept on winning the battle of life. Today, Ellie is a strong, healthy 2-year-old girl sitting with her amazing mother, Robin. In the gallery, Ellie and Robin, we are glad to have you with us tonight. Ellie reminds us that every child is a miracle of life. And thanks to modern medical wonders, 50% of very premature babies delivered at the hospital where Ellie was born now survive. It's an incredible thing. Thank you very much. Our goal should be to ensure that every baby has the best chance to thrive and grow just like Ellie. That is why I'm asking Congress to provide an additional $50 million to fund neonatal research for America's youngest patients. That is why I'm also calling upon members of Congress here tonight to pass legislation finally banning the late-term abortion of babies. Whether we are Republican, Democrat, or Independent, surely we must all agree that every human life is a sacred gift from God. As we support America's moms and dads, I was recently proud to sign the law providing new parents in the federal workforce paid family leave, serving as a model for the rest of the country. Now I call on Congress to pass the bipartisan Advancing Support for Working Families Act, extending family leave to mothers and fathers all across our nation. $40 million American families have an average $2,200 extra thanks to our child tax credit. I've also overseen historic funding increases for high-quality child care, enabling 17 states to help more children, many of which have reduced or eliminated their wait lists altogether. And I sent Congress a plan with a vision to further expand access to high-quality child care and urge you to act immediately. To protect the environment, days ago I announced that the United States will join the 1 Trillion Trees Initiative, an ambitious effort to bring together government and private sector to plant new trees in America and all around the world. We must also rebuild America's infrastructure. I ask you to pass Senator John Barrasso's highway bill to invest in new roads, bridges, and tunnels all across our land. I'm also committed to ensuring that every citizen can have access to high-speed internet, including and especially in rural America. A better tomorrow for all Americans also requires us to keep America safe. That means supporting the men and women of law enforcement at every level, including our nation's heroic ICE officers. Last year, our brave ICE officers arrested more than 120,000 criminal aliens charged with nearly 10,000 burglaries, 5,000 sexual assaults, 45,000 violent assaults, and 2,000 murders. Tragically, there are many cities in America where radical politicians have chosen to provide sanctuary for these criminal illegal aliens. In sanctuary cities, local officials order police to release dangerous criminal aliens to prey upon the public instead of handing them over to ICE to be safely removed. Just 29 days ago, a criminal alien freed by the sanctuary city of New York was charged with the brutal rape and murder of a 92-year-old woman. The killer had been previously arrested for assault, but under New York sanctuary policies, he was set free. If the city had honored ICE's detainer request, his victim would still be alive today. The state of California passed an outrageous law declaring their whole state to be a sanctuary for criminal, illegal immigrants, a very terrible sanctuary with catastrophic results. Here is just one tragic example. In December 2018, California police detained an illegal alien with 5 prior arrests, including convictions for robbery and assault. But as required by California's sanctuary law, local authorities released him. Days later, the criminal alien went on a gruesome spree of deadly violence. He viciously shot one man going about his daily work. He approached a woman sitting in her car and shot her in the arm and in the chest. He walked into a convenience store and wildly fired his weapon. He hijacked a truck and smashed into vehicles, critically injuring innocent victims. One of the victims is a terrible, terrible situation. Died, 51-year-old American named Rocky Jones. Rocky was at a gas station when this vile criminal fired 8 bullets at him from close range, murdering him in cold blood. Rocky left behind a devoted family, including his brothers, who loved him more than anything else in the world. One of his grieving brothers is here with us tonight. Jody, would you please stand? Jody, thank you. Jody, our hearts weep for your loss, and we will not rest until you have justice. Senator Thom Tillis has introduced legislation to allow Americans like Jody to sue sanctuary cities and states when a loved one is hurt or killed as a result of these deadly practices. I ask Congress to pass the Justice for Victims of Sanctuary Cities Act immediately. The United States of America should be a sanctuary for law-abiding Americans, not criminal aliens. In the last 3 years, ICE has arrested over 5,000 wicked human traffickers, and I have signed 9 pieces of legislation to stamp out the menace of human trafficking domestically and all around the globe. My administration has undertaken an unprecedented effort to secure the southern border of the United States. Before I came into office, if you showed up illegally on our southern border and were arrested, you were simply released and allowed into our country, never to be seen again. My administration has ended catch and release. If you come illegally, you will now be promptly removed from our country. Very importantly, we entered into historic cooperation agreements with the governments of Mexico, Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. As a result of our unprecedented efforts, illegal crossings are down 75% since May, dropping 8 straight months in a row. And as the wall rapidly goes up, drug seizures rise, and the border crossings are going down and going down very rapidly. Last year, I traveled to the border in Texas, and met Chief Patrol Agent Raul Ortiz. Over the last 24 months, Agent Ortiz and his team have seized more than 200,000 pounds of poisonous narcotics, arrested more than 3,000 human smugglers, and rescued more than 2,000 migrants. Days ago, Agent Ortiz was promoted to Deputy Chief of Border Patrol, and he joins us tonight. Chief Ortiz, please stand. A grateful nation thanks you and all of the heroes of Border Patrol and ICE. Thank you very much. Thank you. To build on these historic gains, we are working on legislation to replace our outdated and randomized immigration system with one based on merit, welcoming those who follow the rules, contribute to our economy, support themselves financially, and uphold our values. With every action, my administration is restoring the rule of law and reasserting the culture of American freedom. Working with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, thank you, Mitch, and his colleagues in the Senate, we have confirmed a record number of 187 new federal judges to uphold our Constitution as written. This includes two brilliant new Supreme Court justices, Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh. Thank you. And we have many in the pipeline. My administration is also defending religious liberty, and that includes the constitutional right to pray in public schools. In America, we don't punish prayer. We don't tear down crosses. We don't ban symbols of faith. We don't muzzle preachers and pastors. In America, we celebrate faith. We cherish religion. We lift our voices in prayer, and we raise our sights to the glory of God. Just as we believe in the First Amendment, we also believe in another constitutional right that is under siege all across our country. So long as I am president, I will always protect your Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. In reaffirming our heritage as a free nation, we must remember that America has always been a frontier nation. Now we must embrace the next frontier, America's manifest destiny in the stars. I am asking Congress to fully fund the Artemis program to ensure that the next man and the first woman on the moon will be American astronauts, using this as a launching pad to ensure that America is the first nation to plant its flag on Mars. My administration is also strongly defending our national security and combating radical Islamic terrorism. Last week, I announced a groundbreaking plan for peace between Israel and the Palestinians. recognizing that all past attempts have failed. We must be determined and creative in order to stabilize the region and give millions of young people the chance to realize a better future. 3 years ago, the barbarians of ISIS held over 20,000 square miles of territory in Iraq and Syria. Today, the ISIS territorial caliphate has been 100% destroyed, and the founder and leader of ISIS, the bloodthirsty killer known as al-Baghdadi, is dead. We are joined this evening by Carl and Marcia Mueller. After graduating from college, their beautiful daughter, Carla, became a humanitarian aid worker. She once wrote, "Some people find God in church, some people find God in nature, some people find God in love. I find God in suffering. I've known for some time what my life's work is, using my hands as tools to relieve suffering." In 2013, while caring for suffering civilians in Syria, Kayla was kidnapped, tortured, and enslaved by ISIS and kept as a prisoner of al-Baghdadi himself. After more than 500 horrifying days of captivity, al-Baghdadi murdered young, beautiful Kayla. She was just 26 years old. On the night that U.S. Special Forces operations ended al-Baghdadi's miserable life, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, received a call in the Situation Room. He was told that the brave men of the elite Special Forces team that so perfectly carried out the operation had given their mission a name, Task Force 814. It was a reference to a special day, August 14th, Kayla's birthday. Carl and Marcia, America's warriors, never forgot Kayla, and neither will we. Thank you. Every day, America's men and women in uniform demonstrate the infinite depth of love that dwells in the human heart. One of these American heroes was Army Staff Sergeant Christopher Hake. On his second deployment to Iraq in 2008, Sergeant Hake wrote a letter to his one-year-old son, Gage. "I will be with you again," he wrote to Gage. "I will teach you to ride your first bike, build your first sandbox, watch you play sports, and see you have kids also. I love you, son. Take care of your mother. I am always with you, Daddy." On Easter Sunday of 2008, Chris was out on patrol in Baghdad when his Bradley fighting vehicle was hit by a roadside bomb. That night, he made the ultimate sacrifice for our country. Sergeant Hake now rests in eternal glory in Arlington, and his wife, Kelly, is in the gallery tonight, joined by their son, who is now a 13-year-old and doing very, very well. To Kelly and Gage, Chris will live in our hearts forever. He is looking down on you now. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you both very much. The terrorist responsible for killing Sergeant Hake was Qasem Soleimani, who provided the deadly roadside bomb that took Chris's life. Soleimani was the Iranian regime's most ruthless butcher, a monster who murdered or wounded thousands of American service members in Iraq. As the world's top terrorist, Soleimani orchestrated the deaths of countless men, women, and children. He directed the December assault and went on to assault U.S. forces in Iraq, was actively planning new attacks when we hit him very hard. And that's why last month, at my direction, the U.S. military executed a flawless precision strike that killed Soleimani and terminated his evil reign of terror forever. Our message to the terrorists is clear. You will never escape American justice. If you attack our citizens, you forfeit your life. In recent months, we have seen proud Iranians raise their voices against their oppressive rulers. The Iranian regime must abandon its pursuit of nuclear weapons, stop spreading terror, death, and destruction, and start working for the good of its own people. Because of our powerful sanctions, the Iranian economy is doing very, very poorly. We can help them make a very good and short-time recovery. It can all go very quickly, but perhaps they are too proud or too foolish to ask for that help. We are here. Let's see which road they choose. It is totally up to them. As we defend American lives, we are working to end America's wars in the Middle East. In Afghanistan, the determination and valor of our warfighters has allowed us to make tremendous progress, and peace talks are now underway. I am not looking to kill hundreds of thousands of people in Afghanistan, many of them totally innocent. It is also not our function to serve other nations as law enforcement agencies. These are warfighters that we have, the best in the world, and they either want to fight to win or not fight at all. We are working to finally end America's longest war and bring our troops back home. War places a heavy burden on our nation's extraordinary military families, especially spouses like Amy Williams from Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and her two children, 6-year-old Eliana and 3-year-old Rowan. Amy works full-time and volunteers countless hours helping other military families. For the past 7 months, she has done it all while her husband, Sergeant First Class Townsend Williams, is in Afghanistan on his 4th deployment in the Middle East. Amy's kids haven't seen their father's face in many months. Amy, your family's sacrifice makes it possible for all of our families to live in safety and in peace, and we want to thank you. Thank you, Amy. But Amy, there is one more thing. Tonight we have a very special surprise. I am thrilled to inform you that your husband is back from deployment. He is here with us tonight, and we couldn't keep him waiting any longer. Welcome home, Sergeant Williams. Thank you very much. As the world bears witness tonight, America is a land of heroes. This is a place where greatness is born, where destinies are forged, and where legends come to life. This is the home of Thomas Edison and Teddy Roosevelt, of many great generals, including Washington, Pershing, Patton, and MacArthur. This is the home of Abraham Lincoln, Frederick Douglass, Amelia Earhart, Harriet Tubman, the Wright brothers, Neil Armstrong, and so many more. This is the country where children learn names like Wyatt Earp, Davy Crockett, and Annie Oakley. This is the place where the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth and where Texas patriots made their last stand at the Alamo. The beautiful, beautiful Alamo. The American nation was carved out of the vast frontier by the toughest, strongest, fiercest, and most determined men and women ever to walk on the face of the earth. Our ancestors braved the unknown, tamed the wilderness, settled the Wild West, lifted millions from poverty, disease, and hunger, vanquished tyranny and fascism, ushered the world to new heights of science and medicine, laid down the railroads, dug out the canals, raised up the skyscrapers, and ladies and gentlemen, our ancestors built the most exceptional republic ever to exist in all of human history, and we are making it greater than ever before. This is our glorious and magnificent inheritance. We are Americans. We are pioneers. We are the pathfinders. We settled the new world. We built the modern world. And we changed history forever by embracing the eternal truth that everyone is made equal by the hand of Almighty God. America is the place where anything can happen. America is the place where anyone can rise. And here, on this land, on this soil, on this continent, the most incredible dreams come true. This nation is our canvas, and this country is our masterpiece. We look at tomorrow and see unlimited frontiers just waiting to be explored. Our brightest discoveries are not yet known. Our most thrilling stories are not yet told. Our grandest journeys are not yet made. The American age, the American epic, the American adventure has only just begun. Our spirit is still young. The sun is still rising. God's grace is still shining. And my fellow Americans, the best is yet to come. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you very much.
Donald Trump, the President of the United States, giving his third annual State of the Union address. He said he was going to speak for an hour and 25 minutes. By my clock, he spoke for about an hour and 20, touching, of course, on a range of subjects from the economy to healthcare to immigration. Sounded almost like a campaign rally without some of the president's more colourful rhetoric out on the campaign, but it was definitely a pitch. And Nancy Pelosi, we have just been told, ripped up the whole speech. And we heard Democrats actually walking out during the speech saying this was lies, and so they were leaving in protest. It has been an extraordinarily bitter and partisan State of the Union.
And that will be one of the takeaways, won't it? The divide which was really there for all to see on the night, from the very opening snub of the Speaker and the hand that she extended to the President, which he refused to shake, to the way that she reacted behind him through the speech, to some of the facts that he set out, at one point mouthing, that's not true. And if she has, as we suspect she has, just ripped up the speech, that really gives you and I'm just being told that is what she did. It is being confirmed she ripped up the speech. That really tells you what the Democrats thought of it.
Yeah, and those ones who were tweeting during the speech saying that they were leaving because this was lies. And of course there is now a system where what the president or what anyone is saying can get fact-checked as it's going along, and people were pointing out, quite a lot of the inconsistencies in what the president was saying. But for the Democrats to respond in this particular way, I think you have to set this against the backdrop of two things. The fact that in this chamber 7 weeks ago, this president was impeached for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress on both of those charges by those members of the House of Representatives, the Democrats having the majority, of course. And you also have to set this against the backdrop of the 2020 election campaign, in which Democrats are aware that this is a president who is presiding over a very strong economy, whose approval ratings are ticking up, and there is nervousness amongst Democrats about their chances of unseating him in November. Yeah,
for all the Democrats didn't like it, the Republicans lapped it up, because some of these Republicans, of course, are going to the polls in 2020 themselves, and this was part State of the Union, as Kathy says, in part campaign speech. She talked a lot about the great economic success, and there is big economic success. We've talked already about the unemployment figures, which are very low, the growth rate, which is very high. And he talked specifically about a blue-collar boom, which is a term, I think, that will come to haunt Democrats in the months ahead. You're going to hear that a lot, I think, on the campaign trail as Donald Trump goes up and down the country.
Let's go to Ron Christie, former advisor to President George W. Bush, who has been listening to the State of the Union address with us. Ron, we've become used to State of the Union addresses being very partisan affairs, very political affairs. They have been for a long time now, with a few rare exceptions. But this one tonight did seem particularly bitter and pointed.
Good evening, Kathy. It certainly did. And from the opening moments, when the president was in the House of Representatives chamber, of course, you saw that he did not shake the Speaker's hand. She, in turn, did not say it was a privilege and high honor to introduce him to the American Congress and the American people. I think what you really saw tonight was an indication of where we are with our politics. Half the chamber standing up wildly cheering, the other half almost sitting in stony silence as the president gave his remarks. And of course, at the very end of it, the Speaker of the House ripping up the president's remarks, which is as clear as indication, I think, as you're going to get of where the state of the Democrats are with this Republican president, as you noted a few moments ago, just several weeks ago, having been impeached by the House of Representatives.
Ron, also the president making a concerted effort, particularly in the first quarter of the speech, to kind of set up tent, if you like, in the Democrats' backyard by making very open, repeated appeals to minority voters, African Americans and Hispanics.
African Americans, Hispanics, not only that, Kathy, if you looked at the laundry list of some of his domestic priorities, you would think that you were listening to a Democratic president. You're talking about paid family and medical leave. You're talking about reducing prescription drug prices. A litany of issues that the Democrats would love to run on, and Christian referenced this a few moments ago, the blue-collar Americans. And then, of course, he gave a lot of bread and butter to his base, talking about preserving the Second Amendment rights to bear arms in the country, talking very favorably about Border Patrol and, of course, his lovely, vaunted wall. So, yeah, I think the president tried to get in the Democrats' head on their bread and butter issues and also gave a lot for his Republican base to cheer about tonight.
Stay there, Ron, would you? Because we're going to bring in as well Marianne Marsh, who's in Boston for us, just to get a take from the Democratic side. Marianne, there was a lot of talk tonight about healthcare and prescription drug prices. The president made a lot of promises, but there was one moment where Democrats stood up and started shouting H.R. 3, which is, of course, a bill that the House passed to try and bring down those prescription drug prices, which they accuse Republicans of blocking.
That's exactly right. And that is the perfect example for this entire speech tonight. One that started out with the chant of 4 more years and certainly sounded more like a Trump rally than a State of the Union. But the rhetoric Donald Trump used tonight was completely divorced from reality and outright lies throughout. He stood up there and said, I'm going to protect your Medicare and Social Security. 2 weeks ago, he gave an interview saying he was going to look at cutting them to pay for his tax cuts, which have bankrupted this country and added trillions to the deficit. He talked about, he said, I'm going to protect your health care. And then a Democrat stood up and said, you're the one who's trying to take it away from us. You're in court trying to abandon Obamacare. You're the one who's getting rid of pre-existing conditions. So time and time again, Donald Trump, I hate to use this word, lied and lied and lied, and the fact checkers must still be working because everything he said in this speech had nothing to do with the truth. And I think that's what so many people, including Nancy Pelosi, found so disturbing when she ripped up that speech. And I would point to 2 other things. Ron talks about the appeals that Donald Trump made to African Americans tonight. That is not about getting African American votes. It's actually to make white suburban voters, who are the only voters left up for grabs in this election, feel a little better about Donald Trump. So they might actually vote for him, hoping he's not really the person they think he is. So some of the Latino voters he could get, but that's really what this was all about. And I think that's what so many people, and Democrats in particular, found disturbing about tonight.
Marianne, we need to go to the Democratic response. This is Governor Gretchen Whitmer from the state of Michigan giving the Democrats' response to the president's State of the Union address.
I'm going to talk to those of you who are watching at home. I'd need a lot more than 10 minutes to respond to what the president just said. So instead of talking about what he is saying, I'm going to highlight what Democrats are doing. After all, you can listen to what someone says, but to know the truth, watch what they do. Michiganders are no different from Americans everywhere. We love our families and want a good life today and a better life tomorrow for our kids. We work hard, and we expect our government to work hard for us as well. We have grit and value loyalty, and we still root for the Detroit Lions. We and all Americans might be weary of today's politics, but we must stay engaged. Our country, our democracy, our future demand it. We're capable of great things when we work together. We cannot forget that despite the dishonesty and division of the last few years, and that we heard tonight from the President of the United States, together we have boundless potential. And young Americans are proving that every day by taking action. That's what I want to focus on tonight. Monty Scott is 13 years old and lives in Muskegon Heights, Michigan. Monty Street was covered in potholes. They were ankle deep, and he got tired of waiting for them to get fixed. So he grabbed a shovel and a bucket of dirt and filled them in himself. During my campaign, people told me to fix the damn roads because blown tires and broken windshields are downright dangerous. And car repairs take money from rent, childcare, or groceries. And we, the Democrats, are doing something about it. In Illinois, Governor J.B. Pritzker passed a multi-billion-dollar plan to rebuild their roads and bridges. Governor Phil Murphy is replacing lead pipes in New Jersey. All across the country, Democratic leaders are rebuilding bridges, fixing roads, expanding broadband, and cleaning up drinking water. Everyone in this country benefits when we invest in infrastructure. Congressional Democrats have presented proposals to keep us moving forward, but President Trump and the Republicans in the Senate are blocking the path. When it comes to infrastructure, Monty has tried to do more with a shovel and a pile of dirt than the Republicans in D.C. have with the Oval Office and the U.S. Senate. Bullying people on Twitter doesn't fix bridges. It burns them. Our energy should be used to solve problems. And it's true for healthcare too. For me, for so many Americans, healthcare is personal, not political. When I was 30, I became a member of the sandwich generation. That means I was sandwiched between two generations of my own family for whom I was the primary caregiver. I was holding down a new job, caring for my newborn daughter, as well as my mom at the end of her brain cancer battle. I was up all night with a baby, and during the day, I had to fight my mom's insurance company when they wrongly denied her coverage for chemotherapy. It was hard. It exposed the harsh realities of our workplaces, our healthcare system, and our child care system. And it changed me. I lost patience for people who are just talk and no action. So as a state senator, I worked with a Republican governor and legislature to expand healthcare coverage to more than 680,000 Michiganders under the Affordable Care Act. Today, Democrats from Maine to Montana are expanding coverage and lowering costs. In Kansas, Governor Laura Kelly is working across the aisle to bring Medicaid coverage to tens of thousands. In New Mexico, Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham enshrined ACA protections into law. Every Democrat running for president has a plan to expand health care for all Americans. Every one of them has supported the Affordable Care Act with coverage for people with pre-existing conditions. They may have different plans, but the goal is the same. President Trump sadly has a different plan. He's asking the courts to rip those life-saving protections away. It's pretty simple. Democrats are trying to make your health care better. Republicans in Washington are trying to take it away. Think about kids like 17-year-old Blake Carroll from Idaho, who organized a fundraiser to pay for his mom's colon cancer treatment. Or 19-year-old Ebony Myers from Utah, who sells art to help pay for her own rare genetic disorder treatment. No one should have to crowdsource their health care, not in America. But the reality is, not everyone in America has a job with health care and benefits. In fact, many have jobs that don't even pay enough to cover their monthly expenses. It doesn't matter what the president says about the stock market. What matters is that millions of people struggle to get by or don't have enough money at the end of the month after paying for transportation, student loans, or prescription drugs. American workers are hurting. In my own state, our neighbors in Wisconsin and Ohio, Pennsylvania, and all over the country, wages have stagnated while CEO pay has skyrocketed. So when the president says the economy is strong, my question is, strong for whom? Strong for the wealthy who are reaping rewards from tax cuts they don't need? The American economy needs to be a different kind of strong. Strong for the science teacher spending her own money to buy supplies for her classroom. Strong for the single mom picking up extra hours so she can afford her daughter's soccer cleats. Strong for the small business owner who has to make payroll at the end of the month. Michigan invented the middle class, so we know if the economy doesn't work for working people, it just doesn't work. Who fights for hardworking Americans? Democrats do. In the U.S. House, Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Democrats passed a landmark bill on equal pay, another bill to give 30 million Americans a raise by increasing the minimum wage, and groundbreaking legislation to finally give Medicare the power to negotiate lower drug prices for America's seniors and families. Those three bills and more than 275 other bipartisan bills are just gathering dust on Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's desk. Senator McConnell, America needs you to move those bills. Meanwhile, Democrats across the country are getting things done. Pennsylvania's Governor Tom Wolf is expanding the right to overtime pay. Michigan is too. Because if you're on the clock, you deserve to get paid. Nevada Governor Steve Sisolak and North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper are working to give hard-working teachers a raise. And speaking of the classroom, Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers unilaterally increased school funding by $65 million last year. In Colorado, Governor Jared Polis has enacted free all-day kindergarten. And in 29 states, we've helped pass minimum wage hikes into law, which will lift people out of poverty and improve lives for families. That's strength. That's action. Democracy takes action. And that's why I'm so inspired by young people. They respond to mass shootings, demanding policies that make schools safer. They react to a world that's literally on fire, with fire in their bellies, to push leaders to finally take action on climate change. They take on a road filled with potholes with a shovel and some dirt. It's what gives me great confidence in our future. And it's why sometimes it feels like they're the adults in the room. But it shouldn't have to be that way. It's not their mess to clean up. It's ours. The choices we make today create their reality tomorrow. Young people, I'm talking to you and your parents and grandparents. Democrats want safe schools. We want everyone to have a path to a good life, whether it's through a union apprenticeship, a community college, a four-year university, without drowning in debt. We want your water to be clean. We want you to love who you love and to live authentically as your true selves. And we want women to have autonomy over our bodies. We want our country welcoming, and everyone's vote counted. 2020 is a big year. It's the year my daughter Sherry will graduate from high school. It's also the year she'll cast her first ballot, along with millions of young Americans. The two things are connected, because walking across a graduation stage is as important as walking into the voting booth for the first time. Her future, all our kids' futures, will be determined not just by their dreams, but by our actions. As we witness the impeachment process in Washington, there are some things each of us, no matter our party, should demand. The truth matters. Facts matter. And no one should be above the law. It's not what those senators say. Tomorrow, it's about what they do that matters. Remember, listen to what people say, but watch what they do. It's time for action. Generations of Americans are counting on us. Let's not let them down. Thank you for listening. God bless America. Good night.
The governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, there giving the Democratic response. An impressive performance, actually, by the governor. Very polished, and very warm and open and friendly, which is important for the Democrats. Rising star in the Democratic Party. Let's go to another Democrat on Capitol Hill behind us in Congress, to Congresswoman Madeleine Dean from Pennsylvania, who was there in the chamber while the president was giving his State of the Union address. Several of your colleagues, Congresswoman, left during the address while the president was speaking. One came out and tweeted, "I can't listen to this anymore because it's so much lies." Is that appropriate for members to leave when the president is speaking?
I won't speak about whether or not it's appropriate. I think this is a free country, and we have the right of free communication. So they were simply reflecting their communication of what they were upset about in terms of this president's presentation tonight. It was a very disappointing speech. It was poorly crafted. I'm somebody who taught writing for 10 years, so there was no good rhetoric in it. But it was filled with the exact opposite of what this president has spent 3 years doing. He's been tearing down our relationships with minorities. He's been tearing down regulations that will protect our climate. He's been tearing down our educational system. And yet he talks about a failed government school. It is the government's responsibility to educate our children. He abandons the responsibilities of this government over and over again. It was hard to take. I felt it was my responsibility to be there and sit there and listen and know what it was he was putting forward. But sadly, it was filled with so much misinformation, so many lies that it was very tough to take.
Congresswoman, he did set out a number of areas where the Democrats and the Republicans need to work together on infrastructure, on healthcare, on prescription drugs. But you look at the sort of body language between the president tonight and the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and you wonder how they can work together on anything.
Well, I know that this speaker has attempted to work with this president over and over again, and I'm confident she will continue to. In caucus just last week, we talked about a $760 billion infrastructure package over 5 years that would do many of the things that the president said. I hope we can work on an infrastructure package for a 21st century economy. We owe that to our communities. We owe that to this country to be stewards of revenue and to make sure we rebuild our infrastructure, make sure we have rural broadband and make our communities safer, make mass transit more plentiful. I hope we can work together. It's up to the president to work. Think of some of the things he talked about. He wants to protect folks' health care. It is he who is in court from day one, tearing down the Affordable Care Act. He wants to reduce prescription drug pricing. Well, why doesn't he command the Senate to take up the bills that we have sent over to protect pre-existing condition? You saw us going H.R. 3. We passed that the end of last year to reduce prescription drug pricing. This president mouths words and doesn't put any legislative heft behind it. But of course, this is a president who stands indicted for abuse of office and for obstruction of Congress. So a tiger does not change his stripes. What we saw tonight was yet again another act.
But Congresswoman, are Democrats going into this State of the Union, or rather just coming out of this State of the Union, somewhat on the back foot? Look, you've just had a fiasco of a first-in-the-nation caucus in Iowa. The president's approval ratings are doing well. The economy is doing well. And there he is in his address also reaching out to some of the voters that you need. It feels like there's a lot of wind in the president's sails tonight.
I didn't feel that at all. And in fact, you saw where I was seated. I was seated behind our row of impeachment managers, who I think did a masterful, sober job of putting before the Senate, the United States Senate, who took an oath of office to do impartial justice. They also spoke before the Chief Justice, who presided. And they showed the damning evidence of this president's impeachable behaviors. So I don't see wind in this man's sails. I see a man who stands impeached, is desperate for re-election, and has surrounded himself with people complicit to try to get him there. I pray tonight that those senators will sleep and say a prayer and wake up in the morning and do impartial justice. This president doesn't have wind in his sails. He has corruption in his administration.
Congresswoman Madeleine Dean, good of you to come and talk to us this evening. Thank you very much for your reaction to the State of the Union speech. Let's go back to Ron Christie, who is in the studio for us. I mean, we've talked a lot about the divide in the House tonight, Ron, but there was a rare moment of bipartisanship, and that was the response to Juan Guaido, who surprisingly was sitting in the gallery, the Venezuelan who obviously wants to become the next president.
There were a few good moments like that, Christian. Obviously, having what many believe is the rightfully elected president of Venezuela in the gallery sent a strong message about democracy, not only here in our hemisphere, but around the world. But certainly the tearjerker, I think, was the American Army sergeant who the president had brought back and had surprised his wife. And there was strong bipartisan enthusiasm and applause for that. But unfortunately, so much of what we saw tonight was a House divided, a House really riven with partisanship, and it makes you wonder what the People's House, the lower chamber, will be able to accomplish for the American people between now and November, when the election looms to select not only the next president of the United States, but all 435 members of Congress.
And Ron, it's common for presidents to single out people who are there as guests of the president and the first lady, but we had more than singling out tonight, something I haven't seen. There are almost gifts being given. There was a scholarship for a young girl. There was a Medal of Honor physically awarded to a conservative talk radio host. There was a reunited family. There was I guess as one commentator said, this was, the showman side of the president kicked in.
Kathy, there's no question that we have a celebrity who now occupies the Oval Office and used his perch and his position from his former life of being a reality talk show individual to really try to weave a canvas together to demonstrate to the American people what he was talking about. Certainly, I've never seen this before. I've never seen this with President Bush, for whom I worked for 4 years. I never saw it with President Obama. yes, they all use individuals to enforce the message that they're trying to put out there, but I've never seen the awarding of the Presidential Medal of Freedom or the scholarship that you mentioned, tangible items that were given out to individuals. It was actually something to see.
Ron, for the moment, thank you. Let's bring back in Marianne Marsh, who's in Boston for us, giving us the Democratic response tonight. I want to talk about something that always gets a lot of attention around the world, and that is, of course, Second Amendment rights. The President talked about his support for people to keep and bear arms. As he was saying that, there was a man escorted out of the gallery for screaming at the President. It is an issue, again, which divides the House.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is but one more issue that is dividing Americans, but the reality is the political debate has shifted on guns. Moms Demand and other entities like them have really gotten the upper hand on this debate and helped really elect a number of the women who got elected to the House in 2018. But I think it's but one more example of how Donald Trump used the State of the Union speech tonight to really target specific constituencies and especially his base with a litany of things that he talked about tonight in an effort to launch his campaign tonight and his reelection. It was a very partisan speech, very divisive, very tough, and we are in for a very, very, very tough 9 months with this campaign in this election.
And we should point out that the man who walked out and who was shouting at the president was the father of a young boy who'd been killed in the Parkland shootings down in Florida. So this is clearly incredibly emotional for him. It's a very emotional subject around the country generally. You saw at the very end Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, ripping up the speech, Marianne. Is that something that is that something that is appropriate for a speaker to do, and is it something that might not serve her very well?
Well, we started this evening with Nancy Pelosi extending her hand to Donald Trump to shake it, and he turned his back on her. And at the end of this speech, she had the last word by ripping up that speech. Nancy Pelosi always gets the last word, and nobody knows how to handle Donald Trump better than Nancy Pelosi. But I think whether it was Congresswoman Dean who just spoke and many others, that speech was tough to take tonight if you believe in the truth and the facts, as Governor Whitmer of Michigan talked about. So I think it ended up exactly where it belonged. And Nancy Pelosi does everything for a reason. Everything, and that was.
Caddy actually said that to me as we were watching it. She said, because I was saying, you know, the thing that was really getting some pickup on social media is the fact that he'd not shook her hand at the beginning, and I said, well, that was quite a snub, and you said, you know what, Nancy Pelosi will see the political advantage to that, and she does. She is a strategist, isn't she, Marianne?
She is brilliant, and people never underestimate Nancy Pelosi, but she totally has Donald Trump's number, and she got it again tonight. But let me point to one thing. Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats worked really, really hard with Republicans to pass the USMCA. The signing ceremony was last week, and Donald Trump did not invite one Democrat, not Nancy Pelosi, not one Democrat, and that was a bipartisan bill. And that, I think, started to draw the line for this week and what we saw tonight. That foreshadowed it. So again, never underestimate Nancy Pelosi. She was breathing down his neck tonight, and believe me, she is not done with Donald Trump yet, by no stretch.
Okay, Marianne Marsh joining us from Boston. Thank you, Marianne, and thank you as well for joining us from Iowa when we were there as well.
Tomorrow,
yes,
we go on again, Ron Christie, and it turns to the vote on impeachment in the House. Nancy Pelosi might have plans for Donald Trump, but tomorrow he gets the last laugh on the impeachment hearing.
I think that's right, Christian, and it should take place around 4 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow, when the Senate will be gavelled back into session for the last time as a court of impeachment, and the United States senators will each take the opportunity to vote to either convict the president and remove him from office, or to acquit him and allow him to stay. And all indications are right now that the president will be acquitted. He will be acquitted rather easily. So the question now becomes, how can this House of Representatives, how can this United States Senate, that seems so divided, so partisan, so really at odds with one another, try to come together in the coming months to do the work for the American people? And I think that's going to be the hardest challenge that President Trump and Nancy Pelosi and many other leaders in Congress are going to face.
Okay, Ron Christie, thank you very much. That is the question after tonight. It was a very divisive State of the Union. It's a very divided country. It's a very divided Congress, which is where Christian and I are standing right now. And the question, as Ron says, how does it get better?
Yeah. Thank you very much for joining us for coverage. Plenty more to come on the BBC News about the State of the Union. But from Kari and me, thanks for watching.